Okay. Now, I'll do, shall I do it this way? I'm just wondering whether I should be authentic. No, well, see, at this point in the stroke trial, they jumped to lesson 10. So we've done lesson 4, and then they jumped to lesson 10. Because it's out of order, I have to confess I haven't. It's lying down. Okay, let's do it. Shall we do it out of order then? We are completely recapitulating the stroke trial in Adelaide. Of course she did. Yeah, yeah. Right, yeah, I didn't actually ever hear either. We could ask her. Well, I tell you what, we'll do lesson 10 today and lesson 5 tomorrow, and you can think about why Ms. Mayo did the thing. Okay, so lie on your back. Now he doesn't actually even get them to lie on the back. I don't know. This is Jane's transcribed this, and she's got modified transcript, bare bones only. So I won't be able to. I can't tell you whether this is I'm quoting him or not. Okay. Do your own scan. Is that? Yep, DIY. That's it. I like that, Linda. This is a DIY scan. If you need to or not. Okay, roll onto your right side. And have your knees bent comfortably. So I'll do a little bit of paraphrasing here. Now, you've probably figured this out for yourself, but if you haven't, if you have your legs in line with yourself, like so not bent, and feel that you are inherently unstable, right? You will roll really easily. Now, so if you're doing a lesson where you want people to be inherently unstable and find stability, by all means, teach it with the legs straight in line. Now bend them up and find a place where you are stable. Yeah, so that's the point here. And have the left hand on the floor in front of you, somewhere near you. And I think you can prop your head on some supports. If you haven't got any supports, just pop your head on your right hand. That's certainly what the instruction says, is have your head on your right arm, but you can have a support if you want to. And gently, slowly, bring your left shoulder a little bit forward and back to where you started. The left hand's on the floor in front of you. Left hand's on the floor in front, close to your body, but underneath your right arm. That's that. Yeah, well, relative to you. Yeah, yeah. So when I say underneath, it means like if you are you, it's this side of your arm. Yeah. If underneath your arm, literally, if you weren't referencing to yourself, would be tucked underneath it, in between the arm and the floor. That's not what I mean. Underneath, remember the references here are always relative to you, as if you're standing. So what is above and below, if it's below, it means below the right arm. Maybe that's a better word. He keeps saying underneath though. That's, if English is what is third language, fifth language, 10th language, I'm not sure. Okay, so you're bringing your left shoulder a little bit forward and back to where you started. And begin to pay attention to where else in you moves. So clearly that pointy part of your shoulder is coming forwards relative to you, and then back to where you started. What else comes with it? So is there any movement in the rest of your trunk? Can you feel your shoulder blade? Does it influence the position of your head? The front of your chest? They don't move. Well, you don't keep them glued, but you're not purposefully moving them. But they're not glued. And you'll find with the general public that question, they'd go, what's this got to do with knees? They wouldn't even notice. It's only because you're a superfish that you notice that your knees slide. What about your left collarbone? Continue to do that a few more times. And now bring your left arm up and lie it along the left side of you so that your hand is kind of dangling in the direction of your, sort of on the widest part of your hip, your pelvis. And so your fingers will be kind of dangling down towards your sit bones in a way. And have your hand very relaxed. So it's not grabbing anything or doing any poking or scratching. It's just the fingers are dangling. And in this position, bring your left shoulder a little bit backwards in the direction of the floor behind you. And come back to where you started from, and continue to do that for a few times. Now remember, in Feldenkrais, the point is that we're learning to do things easier and easier. So don't go too far. Just go as far as you can until you notice that the effort starts to increase a bit. So you go as far as is easy, in other words. This is very unusual, isn't it, for us in our society, where we kind of push ourselves, go harder, go faster. So in this method, it's kind of the opposite. We get rid of that work ethic and we only go as far as easy, and we come back and we go as far as is easy, and then we go to the toilet. Sorry. Beck. I do like stirring you, Beck. It's very good. We're all friends here. Okay, so the left shoulder's going back and coming to the start, going back. And begin to notice in this movement what else is moving. What's happening in your chest? What direction does your chest go in as your shoulder goes back and comes back forward again? What happens in your head? Anything? Nothing? Something? If it's a something, what's the direction? Do you sense any movement between your shoulder blade and the chest wall? Now, FYI, the general public, some of them don't even know they've got a shoulder blade. Do you remember a time when you didn't know that you had a shoulder blade? Yeah, so just not everybody knows that. Most people know where their collarbone is, but not necessarily, in a vague kind of way. And now, next time you come back to the starting position, continue that shoulder going forward. So the shoulder is, the left shoulder is now moving forward and then backward. Now, it would be possible for you to just roll on your chest and the shoulder gets carried forwards and backwards. So that's one way of interpreting this. The other way is to really think that it's your shoulder moving first, and then your chest might roll as a result of the shoulder moving. So maybe try those two different ways, just rolling your chest forwards and backwards as if you're going to roll onto your belly and then back. And now leave your chest a little bit quiet and have your shoulder itself rolling over the chest. And then note that if you go far enough, the chest will start to move, but only because of the shoulder, not the other way around. See if you can feel that difference. That's it. Okay, and now have your left hand on the floor in front of you again. You can get me back some other time. You will. Yeah, I know. You and Philippa, because you're lying together, you'll think up something diabolical. Philippa's going, what? What did I do? Why bring me into this? Okay, so your left hand is on the floor in front of you, like we started. Now, this time, first of all, just think about it. Think of moving your left shoulder up in the direction of the head. So actually, it's more specifically the direction of the left ear. And then go ahead and do it. What does that feel like? So that top point of the shoulder is sliding up towards the left ear. Excuse me. And then back to where you start and continue to slide the shoulder up towards the left ear. Might be a little tiny movement. And remember, the thing is to find out the easy range, not the straining range, but the easy range. We're learning through ease, not through strain. Now, the next time that you slide your shoulder a little bit towards the ear, lift your head as if you're going to bring the ear to meet your shoulder, kind of halfway. Now, they don't have to touch at all, but it's just that direction. It's the smallest movement that is easy. Move the shoulder in the direction of the ear and the ear in the direction of the shoulder. Only as much as is easy to do. And keep breathing. Forward, yep. So your head doesn't roll. It lifts sideways. It's just a straight side bend. That's it. And then leave your head lying where it was and quietly move the shoulder up towards the ear again. Notice if that's any different. And then next time your shoulder comes back to the starting position, keep the shoulder going downwards, so in the direction of the side of your left hip. So it goes away, even further away from the left ear. And then it comes back to the starting position and then keeps going up towards the ear and then moves away. And again, be very clear that it's the shoulder sliding. If anything else then moves, it's as a result of the shoulder movement. It's not that you're arching your trunk to move the shoulder. It's the shoulder moving everything else. And roll over and lie on your back and have a rest. A scan. Do a Linda scan. We're going to call it a Linda scan. Now DIY is too hard to say. A free range scan. What I mean by that, check in with yourself. Ask yourself how you are. Open-ended question. Okay, roll onto your right side again with your knees bent comfortably so that you feel nice and stable. Have your head comfortable either on a pad or on your right arm. And now with your arm lying down the left side so that the fingers are hanging down over the end of your hips. Think about that movement of your shoulder coming forwards and backwards, and then the other movement of your shoulder going up and down. Now, bring your shoulder forward, and then from there, slide it around towards your left ear. And then from your left ear, so it's raised up, take it to the back position, but behind you. And then from the back position, keep sliding it down so that it goes towards your left hip. And then from there comes into the forward position. So those 4 points, if you like, you can join up with a circle. So continue to do that, to join up those 4 points, the forwards, then up towards the left ear, circle backwards, and then down to the hip, and then forwards, and keep going. Do that several times. And as you continue that movement, notice the pathway of movement throughout the rest of you. Do you feel any movement in the side of the ribs under that shoulder? Does it have an influence on your head? Does your head sort of have a quiet change of position? The shoulder blades, the collarbone. And go easily, simply. It can be as small a circle as you like. Could you make it a smooth circle? Does it feel a bit bumpy, a bit like a gear with little sort of ratchets in it? If you go slower, can you make it smoother? Comfortable, simple, no hurry. And can you breathe while you're making the circle? Good. Now bring your left hand on the floor in front of you. Palm down. And now make the circle, but in the opposite direction. So you might start with the shoulder coming forward, but now it goes down towards the hip. Arcs down towards the hip, and then arcs backwards to that backward position, and then arcs up and forwards to the left ear, and then keeps going to the fully forward position. So again, notice the shape of the circle. So if we had a little dot on the point of your circle that registered the movement, what kind of circle would it look like? Would it look a bit like an oval or a square tipped on its point? Is it a smooth line? Is it smooth all the way around? Is there a part where you'd like to go a bit faster? Can you make it uniform and still comfortable and still easy? Nimbler, that's the word he's using. Make it a little bit more nimbler. A little bit nimbler, not more nimbler. Good. Now reverse the circle just once or twice and do a couple of circles in one direction and a couple of circles in the other. Quite light and quite easy. And breathe so that your breathing can be uninterrupted, independent of the circles. Good, leave it and roll onto your back. So at this point, he does give them something to notice, a scan. Notice with your arms down by your sides, how long does your left arm feel compared to your right arm? Do they feel the same? Is there a difference between the left shoulder blade and the right shoulder blade? Can you feel both of them on the floor, and do they feel the same? And if you notice, if you can sense your face, for example, does the left side of your face feel the same to you as the right side of your face? Okay, roll back onto your right side and have your knees bent comfortably. And your left arm lying along the left side of your body. Now very gently move your left hip a little bit forwards and a little bit just and back to the starting position. And start off with a very little movement. You might notice also a movement of the left knee, and this might remind you maybe of the movement that we did in the chair a couple of lessons ago when you pushed your hip joint forwards sitting on the chair, and that pushed your knee forward a little bit. So that this movement might be a little bit of a reminder of that. Is it same movement of the skeleton, but quite a different sensation, isn't it? And is it easier going forwards than coming back to the starting position, or is it about the same? So that you can breathe equally easily going forwards as coming back. It doesn't matter how big the movement is. The important thing is that you do the movement so that it's easy, in the part of the movement that feels easy, comfortable. You could do it without any strain, any fuss, any bother. Okay, next time you come back to the starting position, continue the movement so that you take that hip a little bit backward. And notice the influence that that has on the knee. So for most people, the knee will slide a little bit. It kind of depends on how I thought you were having a rest. How bent your hips are. But notice for you, is there any sense of as the left hip pulls backwards, that it rotates your pelvis backwards, and that your left knee maybe slides a little bit inside of your right knee? And does that have any influence on your breathing as you go back and come to the starting position and then go back and come back to the starting position? And notice when the rest of the body starts to come with the hip. So it's not like the shoulder joint can't move, but it doesn't move the same amount as the hip joint. The hip joint moves, and then because the hip joint is moving, eventually, the pelvis will, well, not eventually, the pelvis will roll backwards a little bit, and then that will kind of have a little pulling effect on the chest, so that will roll back a little bit. And that might have an influence on the shoulder and maybe a little tiny influence on the head. However, you're very clear that it's the pelvis, it's the hips that are moving backwards. The next time you come to the starting position, have them go forwards as well, so you have that full arc of movement. That the left hip joint pushes forwards, and the left knee goes in front of the right knee, and then the left hip joint pulls back, and it keeps going back as far as is easy, and the left knee comes a bit behind the right knee. And now put the left hand on the floor in front and continue the movement. And notice if does that change the movement in any material way or not? For some people it'd be easier, for some people it's not so easy. Good. Leave that rest for a moment on your side. You can check if you were holding your breathing or not now that you're quiet. Do you feel like you have to catch up with your breathing? It's a bit of a sign. Now very gently and slowly, think about that widest part of your hips there, that point on the side, and bring that point a little bit closer in the direction of your left ear. So in the direction of the left ear or the left shoulder. Have your hand in front of you on the floor. And how do you bring that hip a little bit higher towards your ear? Yep. And leave your head where it is. So it's just the hip moving, and the right leg stays still. Now, at this point, he says, put your left hand between your thighs. Put your fingers between your thighs so that you can feel whether you can roll your thigh with the hip joint upwards. Okay. So put your left fingers between your two thighs, so your upper legs, and then roll your hip joint a little bit more towards the left. Now, what he doesn't say is whether to lift the left foot or not. So let's do both. So you got your hand there to feel, he says just feel the left thigh rolling. Lift your left foot and then your thigh will really roll. And notice that will make it easier to have your left, so your knees stay together and it's just your left foot that lifts up towards the ceiling. The right foot stays on the floor. That's it. And maybe you'll notice that the left thigh rolls inwards a little bit, inwards over your hand. And then maybe that helps you to feel that left side of your pelvis can come up a little bit closer to your left shoulder and then go back again. So I'm personally not entirely clear about whether he never actually, these instructions don't say to lift the left foot, but it seems to me that with the hand, he certainly says put the hand between the thighs. I can't see how you feel too much with the hand there unless you do lift the foot. So try it both ways. Now leave the foot quiet and continue to roll the left hip up towards the shoulder. And do you feel any movement of the left thigh now? So it's more obvious now? Yeah. So that's just a nice little differentiation that you could put in or not. And then leave it, because you don't want to keep lifting the foot up. Let the foot be quiet and continue to roll the pelvis sideways without lifting the foot. The foot will slide a little bit, but without that really obvious hip joint movement. Okay, and take your fingers away from between the thighs. And now put your hand on that sort of iliac crest of your pelvis. So again, if it was a lay, yeah, and have your fingers pointing in the direction of your buttocks. So the heel of your hand is there. And now you could have this, you could imagine that your hand could push that side of your pelvis down away from your shoulder. And go ahead and do that. So take that side of your hips, the left side of your hip joint, away from the shoulder. And it's like your hand can push it away. And then come back to the starting position and push it away. And begin to notice that as that side of your pelvis moves away from your shoulder, do you notice something on the right side of you on the floor, something that changes? That, you know, that your right side, when you're back into neutral, that the right side can lie quite supported on the floor. But then as you push the left hip away from you, that it's like the right side gets picked up a little bit off the floor. That's it. Now take your hand away and see if you can continue the movement without the hand. So the pelvis is doing that tipping downwards by itself. So you can put the left hand quietly in front of you on the floor and find a way for the pelvis to roll so that left hip goes away from you. And do you still have that same sense of the right side of you being lifted up off the floor a little bit? That's it. Okay, so you might have realized that we've made 4 points again, that the left hip joint moving forwards and backwards, and then up towards your ear and away from your ear. So go ahead and see if you can make a circle with that point of the side of your hip. So you're pushing it forwards first. Remember, that's when the left knee goes a little bit longer, and then it goes up, and then it goes back, and then it goes down away from you. And what do you notice? Yeah, if you want to put your hand on that side of your hip, that's fine, so that you could feel maybe that movement of your hand being carried around in a circle, forwards, up, back, and down, and forwards. And what's happening in your, you might notice that your knee's making a little bit of a circle on the other knee as well. And what's happening at your waist. Then pop your left hand back on the floor and continue the circle. And change the direction. And there's one circle direction easier than the other. You have to go. Roll onto your back and rest. And notice your left leg versus your right leg. What might you notice? Does one feel longer than the other? Does one feel bigger than the other? Clearer, more fuzzy, heavier, lighter, thicker, thinner? Something like that. Is there any difference between the two? And how does it feel between the left shoulder and the left hip? The right shoulder and the right hip? Roll onto your right side again. And have your left hand on the floor in front of you. Very gently bring your left shoulder forward at the same time as the left hip. And then bring them back together. So they come back together and they go forward together. Back to the starting position. Yep. And then once that forward movement is clear, so it's kind of similar to just the shoulder or just the hip, but actually it's a bit different as well, isn't it? So see if you can tell what's similar and what's different. And then next time you come back to the starting position, keep going back. So you take the shoulder and the hip backwards, a little bit behind you, together. And they come back to the starting position and then they go forward. And then they come back to the starting position and they both go back. And how easy is this movement? Can you keep it light, free, easy? And then next time you come to the starting position, bring your left shoulder and your left hip up. So they both go in the direction of your ear. And then down to starting position. Do that a few times. Might just be a little movement, but can you link those two movements together? That's it. And down. And then the next time you come to the starting position, keep going down. So the left shoulder goes away from the ear and the left hip goes away, even, you know, in the sort of foot direction as well. They go up, come back to the starting position and they go down. And can you think of both of those parts of you at the same time? Or do you find that one dominates and you kind of forget the other one? How do you train your brain to think of both things at the same time? So they go all the way up, sliding up, and then they slide down. That's it. Okay, now let's just go through the next one nice and simply. Rest on your side for a moment, and I'll quietly talk you through. But basically, you know, you've done a circle with your shoulder and a circle with your hip. Now you're going to do a circle in both parts of you at the same time. So both parts will come forward. They'll arc up towards your left ear, and they'll both go backwards and arc down away from your left ear, and then come back to forwards again. Okay, so off you go, starting with forward and both up, rolling back, down and forward. And again, how easy is it to train your mind to do two things as one thing? Great, good. And reverse the circle. And at one point in the circle, would you like to just keep rolling back and lie on your back? So it's like your shoulder and your hip could roll you back onto your back, and you could stretch out your legs and have a lovely rest on your back. And get really tangled up in your blankies. Sorry? Were you doing the worm, the version of this lesson? Lovely. Okay. And lying on your back, notice the length of your left arm compared to the right arm, and the left leg compared to the right leg. And how does the left side feel? So that part between your left shoulder and the left hip compared to that same side, that same area on the other side, between your right shoulder and your right hip. And where do you notice that you're breathing? Is there a difference in breathing on the right side compared to the left? Now, can you imagine rolling over and sitting up and then coming into standing? So obviously this is elderly citizens, so he's saying, you know, move to the chair near you and use the chair to help yourself get up into standing. Or if, you know, if you're doing this on your bed, imagine standing. So it's for people who aren't ambulant. But for you guys, because you are miraculously not elderly, you've just shed 30 years, you can stand up all by yourself. And thank you to whoever draped the skeleton. Maybe it was Julieta when she left. He was feeling a little bit cold as well. He's not got a lot of flesh to keep him warm. So take a moment in standing to notice the difference between the right side and the left side. If there is a difference, that is. So for some people, this will just even them up a bit, and other people, they'll feel like their left side has had a beautiful grease and oil change. Feldenkrais here says, you know, your left side might feel like you've shed 30 years. So how do we get the other side to feel as young and as nimble as the left side? Have we had an afternoon tea break? You can have a 2.5 minute, 3 minutes. A 3-minute water in, water out break.